All right, guys. Welcome back to another episode of Saturday Standouts presented by the Unwrapped Sports Network. As you can see, we've got a nice, pretty new face in here. Sam is busy, with his finals and everything. So joining me today is the co-founder of Unwrapped Sports, Perry Aston. You can go ahead and say what's up to the people, Perry.
What is going on, Saturday Standouts? I am so pumped to be here. So thank you again for having me, Caleb. Thank you, Sam, for being busy so I can be on this week. Let's get it. I'm excited.
Yeah, it's going to be a fun one. There's a lot going on. College football is starting to come to a close. We're going to start getting prepared for the NFL draft and everything. Drake Bell, Pete Davidson live for Unwrapped. I love it. I love the resemblance.
I'm humbled. I'm humbled.
Absolutely. Hey, I'll take that as a compliment.
Absolutely.
Yeah, but before we get going any further, let's go ahead and, pay the bills, as, everybody likes to say around here. And we'll start off with rxhemp.com. You guys can follow down there below on the ticker and see them throughout the show. But rxhemp.com, all natural pain relief cream, that's CBD oil there as well. If you head over to rxhemp.com, use code rxhemp-USN, you get 10% off every single one of your purchases. Great stuff for if you're achy all the time, or you used to play a sport, you got something that aggravates you. Also, if you're a gambling person, I know Perry and myself both like to gamble, or at least dabble a little bit in it.
Yeah, I like to lose money.
right, and pretty much just like an ATM for whatever bookie I have. So head over to mybookie.ag and use code USN100 for 2 times, so double your first deposit. I think it's a minimum of $45 that you got to put down. So if you put in $50, you get a free $50 from mybookie.ag to play there on whatever you want to play it on. It's awesome stuff there. And then we also just dropped our new shop. You guys can see the link down there at the bottom, teespring.com/stores/unwrapped. Amazing, merchandise we got out there. Perry showing off his bag that he just got in the mail. It's pretty awesome stuff. My stuff's on the way. Looking forward to getting it. I've already got a shirt, so looking forward to it. Yeah, Dalvin Cook -640 anytime touchdown. It's a lock every single week. Besides the point, Dalvin's not in college anymore, but we'll go ahead and talk a little bit about college, and we'll look back at last week, and that was week 14 of the college football season. Like I said, we're starting to wind down here, and Perry, you want to go ahead and tell us who your standout team from last week was?
Sure. I mean, obviously, it was a crazy week. It was weird, as every week has been, with COVID and games being canceled and things being moved around. So definitely an exciting week, but a weird one for sure. The standout team's got to be Coastal Carolina. Seeing what they did to BYU saying any team, any place, very cocky, and the whole Mormons versus mullets thing that they both seemed to embrace. So it didn't seem to offend anybody, which was cool. You got to see a fun theme for the game, as you, I guess, can call it. But maybe it's a new little rivalry, something along the Coastal Carolina has never really made waves in college football at all. I mean, it's the smaller school, and definitely good for them. BYU having the year of their life. Obviously, this is the best year in BYU history. Zach Wilson is the real deal when you look at college quarterbacks. I'm not going to say everything's going to transfer to the NFL. We could take that a step further, but he is a great college quarterback. You could see how he's a good leader for this team. But Coastal Carolina definitely played a fantastic game. It's a fanny pack, not a bag. They're all in the bag family, Garrett. Sorry, I have more style than you, my friend. Get a fanny pack, guys. It's the new wave. Throw it over the shoulder, throw it on the back. You're rocking it. You got to get with it, Garrett.
Yeah, it's fashion, Garrett. Come on, man.
We'll style him up. It's Garrett from Iowa. It's not his fault. His city is, he told me, super small. So no one's wearing a fanny pack in his city. I'll tell you that.
Right. Yeah. And I was originally going to pick this game too, Perry. It was an awesome game. Everybody was looking forward to it. Turned out to be, look at the end of the game and, the fights and everything that was breaking up. And, and the ending of that game was wild. I hope to see these two play each other, get later down the line in future years and everything. But yeah, props to Coastal Carolina. A lot of people, counted them out against BYU and that, lethal offense that they have with Zach Wilson. So really awesome game. And, it goes to show that they're not, just here for now. They're, trying to build for the future as well.
Absolutely. And this has to go a long way for recruiting, things like this, when you have games. Do you remember Florida Gulf Coast when they had that March Madness run? No one was
Right.
signing up to go to Florida Gulf Coast unless it was the place that you got a scholarship from for academics or school, or you just are Florida native, so you don't want to go to the bigger schools. You want to get a cheaper education, like whatever. But no one is going to Florida Gulf Coast to go focus on sports. And when they had that run, you know recruitment got much easier for that staff. Like they were able to walk into rooms the next year and have something to hang their hat on. And I think that Coastal Carolina, it's that version for college football right now. And BYU, even though they lost this game, they should be feeling great. Obviously, their recruiting path is complicated because of what comes with being a student at BYU. And no, you don't necessarily have to go on the mission and stuff like that to go play there, but that's obviously a highly recommended thing when you do go play there. And you have to be able to buy into certain things going to BYU. But at the end of the day, if you're a guy who's focusing on football, only going to the league, maybe you know yourself, you know you're a party animal. Maybe you know that you just can't contain yourself and you like to live a lavish life. Putting yourself at a place that you know that won't be there in front of you, but you know you're still getting a quality education. The sports team is not national championship bound, but they're going to compete every year. You're guaranteed a bowl because after a year like this for BYU, you're not going back down the chute unless you just mess up recruiting like crazy. But they didn't get here by sleeping. They've been working. BYU's been building this program. They're not bums by any means, but for a person that maybe just wants to focus on sports, it's almost like Last Chance U, putting yourself in the middle of nowhere, nothing to do except for just get your shit straight and focus on sports to get to the level you want to be at. I think it's cool. That's where I look at with BYU. I think they really helped themselves. And I think Coastal Carolina really just put themselves on the map. Even though they've been having a great year already, this was like a main primetime game for them that really stood out to a lot of people that maybe didn't buy into Coastal Carolina yet.
Yeah, I love it, especially, you know, all these lower level schools, you know, starting to get a little bit of recognition in terms of national media and everything like that. It's great to see. But I'll talk about my standout team this past weekend, and that's the Iowa State Cyclones. And, you know, everybody's just kind of, you know, ridden them off and ridden, you know, Perry off at the beginning of the year because he wasn't playing all that well. And then as soon as they stop talking about it and, you know, they're not out in the limelight anymore, they come out and do what everybody expected them to do from the get-go. And that's put on a show and put up major points for an offense that, you know, has tons of weapons out there too. And they absolutely put it on West Virginia. They didn't just only do it on the offensive side of the ball. They limited West Virginia to only 3 points. And I mean, in the Big 12, that's a hard thing to do. So you got a real solid defense there in Ames, Iowa. So Purdy is coming out and moving himself back up draft boards after, you know, he started to slide down based off of his performances early on in the season. But it's a different season. So, I mean, it probably took these guys a little bit of time to get their, you know, feet underneath them.
Well, you remember they played, I think it was Baylor that game, and Purdy threw like 3 picks. That was only a couple weeks ago, right? Like probably like 4 weeks ago, maybe. So it's not too far removed from his worst collegiate day. So it's good to see the confidence there for him. You're 100% right. And Breece Hall, who's only a sophomore, is going to be probably the best running back in the country next year, if not one of them. So, I mean, they have a lot to feel good about. Obviously, Purdy, like you said, NFL bound. I see him kind of like the Jake Fromm kind of quarterback where you're not going to, you know, Easton, these kind of guys where they're not going in the first, they're not going in the second, maybe unless you reach. But, you know, a comfortable 3rd or a 4th round pick, and you go and try and make a chance for yourself. Dak Prescott was a 4th round pick. I always say Tom Brady, I believe, was a 6th round pick. So you got to make a name for yourself. You just got to get to the league. And so many, I mean, Tony Romo, one of my favorite quarterbacks of all time, was undrafted. So as long as you go to get yourself an opportunity, it doesn't matter where you're drafted, but looks like Purdy's got the competitive edge. It's just, does he have the intangibles and the athleticism to carry that over to the NFL? And I mean, it seems like he's a smart guy. It seems like he can really run the offense, keep his composure, but it's tough sometimes to tell if some of these guys are transferable because it's so easy to be not easy, but obviously when you got that build to be a good college quarterback seems like like it's so common, Alabama, they never have good quarterbacks. It's all and for NFL, but when it comes to college, they're amazing college quarterbacks like AJ McCarron and, all these different guys that have came from Alabama. Like it's tough, to see if you're going to transfer to the NFL, but I think Purdy definitely is going to have his opportunity to do so. And he, like you said, is helping himself big time. When I was watching that Baylor game, I thought he was screwed. I thought he was done. Like he maybe goes to the NFL. I wasn't even sure if he'd be able to keep rolling. Then they came back and won that game. He's got a very, very deep competitive drive in him. And Iowa State, number 9, 8-2, like they deserve their respect.
Yeah, and they're really coming on strong to right when it matters, especially when it comes down towards, the Big 12, winning the Big 12 there. And they're probably the most likely team to come out of there and probably a long shot to make any type of, playoff appearance at that point. But I mean, a New Year's Six bowl definitely right there in their grasp as long as they keep playing the way they are. This is awesome, in my opinion, just to see them, put together a full game on both sides of the ball that we haven't seen from them this year. So that's great to see from an Iowa State team that everybody was starting to question, and they just really busted the doors open. And more props to them and moving forward and everything like that. But we'll move on here and we'll go over to our Week 14 standout players. And Perry, I'll let you start with your offensive player from Week 14.
Sure. It's Devanta Smith, who is absolutely absurd. Like this guy may be the best wide receiver product I've seen come out of college in a long time. And that's crazy to say after a draft class last year that consisted of the deepest wide receiver class you've ever seen. Already look at the production. It's already, at least if you look at just CD and Jefferson alone, just them two and the numbers that they're putting up this year, absurd. Mm-hmm. It's so deep. But I really think that he's got a chance to be better than all of them. I think he's definitely better than Judy. I think he's definitely better than Ruggs. And that's not a knock on them, more of a compliment to Smith. I mean, 8 receptions, 231 yards and 3 touchdowns. Like, I'll read that again just in case you guys thought I was joking. 8 receptions, 231 yards. That's 28.9 yards a reception, 3 touchdowns. The guy is eating them for breakfast. It's a joke. You see a grown man out there playing with kids. It's how I see it. And like, if you go through his life, this is no fluke. Like, this is his last 4 weeks. On Halloween against Mississippi State, 11 receptions, 203 yards, and 4 fucking touchdowns. Against Kentucky the next week, 9 receptions, 144 yards, 2 touchdowns. 2 weeks ago against 22 ranked Auburn, 7 receptions, 171 yards, 2 touchdowns. And then, like I said, this week with the 8 for 231 and 3 touchdowns. The guy has 11 touchdowns in the last 4 games. 11 touchdowns. And Mac Jones, who is a very good quarterback, is not Joe Burrow. Like, this guy is not anything like we saw. Like, Devonta Smith is everything to Mac Jones. Mac Jones, it's the reason why he'll be going to the NFL, is the reason why he's in the Heisman race. It's solely because of this one individual guy right here. And he wasn't even supposed to be their wide receiver 1. He was supposed to be their wide receiver 2. So this is absurd. Way to make the most of your opportunity. You're playing for Alabama, so you already know you're a freak of nature just to be there on that roster and to not just be the 2, be the 1, and then go and put up numbers like this. He's so ready for the NFL this week. It's absurd. Like, you can strap him up in any NFL jersey and the homeboy is going to at least catch 4 passes this week. I can promise you that.
Yeah, I love everything you're saying. And one thing that I caught on to when you were reading through his stats and game in, game out is the consistency level that he is playing at. It's just absolutely astronomical. And he's doing this all with his number 1 or Alabama's number 1 guy, Jalen Waddle, being injured for the majority of the season. And all the focus turns towards him now. And he's doing this even as the number 1 guy. So
he's facing number 1 corners. Like, he's facing double teams. He's facing triple teams. Like, there isn't that much on the Alabama offense to take away their eyes from him, except for Najee Harris, who is amazing. And we'll get to him later. But he is absorbing every single bit of attention and just playing with people.
Yeah, and he's probably was already automatically a first round draft pick. Me and Sam both had him down probably towards the the late end of the first round there. But I mean, he's really starting to make a name for himself in terms of, hey, we got to start paying attention to this guy
Right.
and already deep wide receiver draft class here. So
Absolutely.
good for
Absolutely.
Devonta Smith, and keep grinding, man. He's just gonna keep doing it. And I guess that'll lead me into my offensive player from last week, and that is Amon-Ra St. Brown, the wide receiver out of USC. As
Oof.
a lot of you should know, is that they played on Sunday because of all the stuff that's going on with COVID and all that situation, games being postponed, being delayed, and all of that. Amon-Ra, man, I was already high on him in terms of him even sneaking into the first round in this upcoming draft, and this just kind of proved it. I mean, it is Washington State, so I mean, it's not necessarily something to get overly excited about. But I mean, the guy had 4 touchdowns in the first quarter. He didn't put up like stupid numbers or anything. I think he maybe had like 60 or so. Let me see here. He had 7 catches for 65 yards. So over half of his catches went for touchdowns, which is pretty crazy. And they all came in the first. I think he set a record for
Crazy.
touchdowns in the first quarter or something, which is a Pac-12 record,
Right.
which is amazing for him. He's, Michael Pittman was there last year, and he took some of the pressure off of him as being the number 2 wide receiver since Michael Pittman was there. But he came into this season being relied upon to be the number 1 guy, and he's proving it, and he's making Slovis look like a great quarterback.
Yeah, and Slovis isn't anything special, so.
Right. And it's like Slovis isn't necessarily a special quarterback, and you are going to be making him look good. You're making him look
Right.
astronomically great. You're making
Absolutely.
him look like probably one of the best quarterbacks in college right now. And I was high
Right.
on Slovis entering the season, but it wasn't because of Slovis. It's just because of the weapons he has around him. And
Sure.
Amon-Ra St. Brown is probably one of the best out there. I mean, I'm trying to look at his stats for the whole season. Just
He's
give me
got
one moment.
No, yeah, he's got Drake London there too, who's from mine and Christian's school, and we actually were friends with his sister Michaela. So good for him as well, who's balling out. But it's good to see they still have a good wide receiver tandem after Pittman left. To have that pressure being taken off St. Brown as well definitely has helped him really, really flourish this year. He's been really insane. I can see him
And
being a Sunday wide receiver, no doubt.
Absolutely. And the crazy thing about it is he was on a real bad drought here without catching a touchdown. So I think he was gone like 3 or 4 games without having a touchdown grab at all. And then all of a sudden he makes up for it and goes for 4 in one game. And I mean, what do you say about that? He just came in and was
I
like,
mean,
hey,
apparently he participated in No Nut November, and then December comes around and he just fucking exploded.
yeah, he was just insanely good. Just watch. I didn't get to watch the game, but then going over his highlights and everything, I'm like, good lord, dude. I mean,
Right,
he's doing it up against press coverage. Guys are on him, just grabbing onto him, doing everything they can to stop him,
right,
and they just were unable to. And that's why he is
absolutely,
my standout player for Week 14, and on the offensive side of the ball.
yeah,
But on the defensive side of the ball, I'll just jump into mine real quick. And I don't necessarily have a highlight film for him. It's hard to find highlight films on these defensive players unless
it
you're
is. They don't get love. They don't get love.
they don't get the love. They're just the grinders out there. They do the dirty work. Get the ball back. Stop other teams from scoring. But Amen. Hopefully, I don't butcher this last name. Ogbong Bamiga from Oklahoma State. Yes,
Yeah,
Oklahoma State did lose that game to TCU this past weekend, but man, did this kid have a day. He had 3 fumble recoveries. I believe one was a scoop and score, which was insane to watch when you actually were watching highlights on ESPN or anything like that. And what else did he have? Let me see real quick. He had those three fumble recoveries, one for a scoop and score. He had 12 total tackles. 9 of those were solo tackles, so all alone by himself, and then a tackle for loss. So this guy just absolutely got after it against TCU.
right.
Ultimately, one defensive player isn't going to change the game for, to win the game ultimately, but he did the best that he could to keep his team in it. And, props to him in terms of, being a reliable option on that defensive side of the ball where you can count on this guy. He's going to make plays and you don't have to worry about him and everybody else is going to have to pick up the slack around him. But
Right.
what a hell of a game for Amon there. And I don't know if you know anything about him, if you want to speak on it.
I can be real and say that I don't know a ton about him, but just playing for Oklahoma State and playing in that system, obviously they're a very competitive team. I'm a big Oklahoma State person. I'm surprised they lost to TCU. Shout out David Lindsay and Matthew Mino and the network. I know that they go attend Oklahoma State. Definitely an exciting offense usually what their staple is to me, and it didn't seem like their offense really came to play. Like you mentioned, one guy on defense isn't going to change it. They didn't give up 40 points to TCU. They gave up a manageable amount to win that game, but the offense just didn't come to play.
Yeah, and that's really what, Oklahoma State has relied upon in the past few years or so, is that offense and the firepower that Gundy gets that machine running on. And like you said, they just didn't seem to show up. But we'll jump out of the Pac-12 here and go over to your defensive player for this past week.
So we'll go back to the Coastal Carolina BYU game because there's a lot to pull out of that game. And I mean, Derek Bush, he's a junior cornerback on Coastal Carolina, hasn't had the most noteworthy career. I mean, before this day, he had two total interceptions in his career, one being last year as a sophomore, one being this year. He's never had a sack before. He comes to play probably the biggest game of his college career so far at Coastal Carolina against BYU. Really good competition. And he comes out 5 tackles, a sack, and he gets an interception with a return for 42 yards. You come to play when it counts. When you have a big time game like that, this is a guy that came and stepped up. For a cornerback to have a sack and a pick for a 42-yard return, that could be the difference in a game like what they just played. Like, that was a tight game. And a player like that, I know you mentioned that one player on defense doesn't win the game necessarily, but one player on defense, probably the one at Oklahoma State, definitely at least kept that closer, most definitely. Right. And this one potentially might have won the game for them. Obviously, getting that stop at the 1 yard line at the end was massive for that defense as a whole. But it takes sparks like this. It takes plays like what Derek Bush put together, and to put yourself on the map to potentially go to the NFL, for you to potentially have that chance, you need to be able to perform when it counts, have the tape like this, and on a big time stage against BYU to have a sack and an interception for 42 yards as well as 5 tackles. You can't have a much better game for a corner.
And it isn't even the stats that, stuck out to me when it came to Bush in that game against BYU. Is more of the mentality that he had. And, you saw it with the whole, Zach Wilson fiasco, which caused the whole midfield brawl or whatever that happened, that stopped the game for a little bit of time. But right. I mean, just the tenacity that he was going after each and every play with, and then getting inside the heads of a quarterback in the offense goes a long way when it comes to these big time games, and he did exactly that. And props to him for bringing that mentality to that defense in, because that was I don't know if they would even be able to be in that game because of how lethal BYU's offense is if they didn't have that leader or that mentality, started from one player and just resonated throughout the whole rest of the team.
Seriously, I think they lose. I think they lose if he plays like he usually does. So.
Yeah, it's pretty crazy. But we'll move on here from this past week, and we'll take a look to something that's near and dear to a lot of people's hearts, and that's going to be the Heisman race. I know Perry and I both have a couple guys that are similar, but Perry, I'll let you go ahead and name your top 3, and then we'll get into the winner a little bit later.
So my top 3 being Kyle Trask out of Florida, quarterback, Mac Jones, quarterback out of Alabama, and then Devanta Smith, who we already mentioned, wide receiver out of Alabama. I know it's not super common to see wide receivers there in the top 3, but for me, this year has been, like you've mentioned this word before, astronomical. This guy has been absurd. So to go up with these kind of quarterbacks, he absolutely deserves to be there, especially with Trevor Lawrence and Justin Fields missing a lot of time with injury or COVID or games being canceled or whatever that may be. It's not necessarily all of their fault, but I just think that these 3 players have made the most of this season for what it's been worth.
Yeah, I love that you threw in a wide receiver, a player even outside of a quarterback. It's been known recently that the Heisman is a quarterback award now. It's just
or a running back.
But it's been a while since a running back has won the Heisman. So I mean, good to see that you're putting Devonta Smith in there. So the two that I have with you are obviously Mac Jones and Kyle Trask. Those are probably your two front runners there for the Heisman. And then I give the pity, invite to Trevor Lawrence just because it is Trevor Lawrence, even though he's missed time. I just don't see anybody else out there. I mean, I guess you can maybe say Ian Book because he's had a decent season, or maybe a Devonta Smith or somebody like that. But I think T-Law kind of gets the pity invite because of just his college career as a whole. Justin Fields hasn't, played a whole lot. Trevor Lawrence has played more than him. So it's just, a pity invite there. But we'll focus on our two main guys here. And I think it's going to be a closer battle than a lot of people think between Mac Jones and Kyle Trask for this Heisman.
Yeah, no, I agree. And I think it's more surprising for me to see Kyle Trask, and it's more impressive for me to see what he's done with Florida. It's not like Florida's a bad school by any means, but they have not been in the championship run since Tim Tebow left. They haven't been able to really get that together. And I really feel like Kyle Trask was exactly what they needed and didn't even expect. It wasn't like Kyle Trask, when he got there, was the Messiah. He won that job, and he definitely has impressed. He's brought this team to great heights. Obviously, I don't think they're a national championship team myself personally, but they have a chance. They absolutely do. I mean, 8-1, the 6th seed right now. He is the only reason why that's the case. I mean, look at this last game alone against Tennessee, who's nothing insanely good, but he was just playing with them. 35 for 49, 433 yards, 4 touchdowns. Like, if that doesn't scream Heisman to you, then I don't know what does. And to see how he plays the game, the composure that he has, it's really impressive. I think for Kyle Trask, I watch him, and every time I do, it impresses me a little bit more. With Mac Jones, I watch him and I'm very impressed, and it's insane, but I almost expect it more in the Alabama system, playing under Saban with the weapons that he has, even without Waddle. That's more impressive for Mac Jones, because if Waddle was in there too, it's like, bro, put me in. I fucking do that.
Right.
But I mean, it's not like they got bums right now. Like, Devonta Smith is an absolute man, and Najee Harris back there you're able to lean on the running game. So I think that Kyle Trask has much less to work with the exception of Kyle Pitts, who's the best tight end to ever come out of college. And it's way too soon to say that, but we all know it. So just admit it. Like, we all know it. So it's Kyle Trask for me. And it also, just because it's not like I hate Alabama or anything like that, but they win everything, always Alabama's right there. So it's nice to see other teams win. Like, it's been nice to see Oklahoma have those series of Heisman. It's been nice to see a good change. And we mentioned wide receiver really quick. I know we're not going to spend too much, but I looked it up. The last wideout to win the Heisman was Desmond Howard in 1991. So it's like impossible.
That was going to be my guess. I was going to guess with Desmond.
It's impossible. So obviously you can't take it too serious, because because it sucks, because you look at a wide receiver that's balling out, that should be winning the Heisman, and it's almost impossible to not have his quarterback right there too. I mean, obviously the person throwing it, unless he's throwing all types of interceptions on every other pass that he's made except to you. Like, other than that, it's just kind of a given that Mac Jones is going to be here in the Heisman race. And it might only be because Devonta Smith. We don't know that, but it's always the case. It's interesting to see Heisman players that make other players, or other players that make Heisman players.
Yeah, it's crazy. And you expect if an Alabama quarterback does the Alabama quarterback's job, then he's most likely going to get an invite to, the Heisman ceremony. Well,
there's probably not politics, a ceremony. Yeah. It's just how it is.
But both of these guys are having extremely great years. Both of them are in the top 5 in QBR, top 5 in touchdown passes, and top 5 in yards. Mac Jones is 4th with yards, and he's nipping on the heels of Kyle Trask, who's 2nd in yards. But what really sticks out to me here, and the difference between these two, is, the playmakers, like you're saying. At Alabama, you have all these guys. Florida's kind of had, figure it out on the run, when in Alabama it's just kind of plug and play.
Right.
Like, you can put anybody in there for them, and they're supposed to be that good. And yes, Florida does have Kyle Pitts, who, like you were saying, probably the best tight end we're going to see in college football for quite some time, or we have in quite some time. So He does have him, but on the outside, he's got, two weapons in Tony and Grimes too, but they're not necessarily, the Jalen Waddles or the Devontae Smiths of the world.
Right.
So, I mean, they're still making plays, and they might not be playing the same competition. The SEC might be having a little bit of a down year, but what stands out to me the most here is the touchdown passes. I mean, Mac Jones has 27, which ties him for third. And then you go over to Kyle Trask and you look at, he's got 11 more touchdown passes than Mac Jones. He's got 38.
It's insane. And that's at Florida instead of Alabama. Like that carries even more weight for me. It's not really a competition for me. I think it's Kyle Trask's award to lose. And I think that Mac Jones was blessed with the opportunity that he's had at Alabama. He's made the most of it. He deserves his respect because all you can do is play the game that you're given. And he has been winning games. He's been putting up stats. I'm a statistical guy. You know that. So yeah. I'm going to give it to Mac Jones. Like he's doing what he can, and production speaks for itself. Numbers speak for itself. Wins speak for itself. And he deserves that respect. But with Kyle Trask, it's just such like a mind-blowing thing to me to see how well he's done. And like you mentioned, you were talking stats. They're not similar, and then you look at Kyle Trask play, and if you want to do the whole eye test thing, yeah, he's got to win the eye test too. You look at Kyle Trask making plays, like where you're sitting here, that play's dead. That play is not possible. And he makes it. Yeah, you just see that swagger and that confidence. He just puts his foot on your throat and just keeps pushing. And I love seeing that from a guy when I'm thinking, do I want him to be an NFL quarterback for my kind of team? Like that's a guy that you want to run your team. That's a guy that you want with that competitive edge. And you just need to make sure that the intangibles and the IQ that it takes to actually be an NFL quarterback on a week by week basis is there. But the athleticism, the competitive drive, the leadership, the skill, it's all there. He's extremely special.
Yeah, I think it's pretty much a win right now. I think he has it pretty much locked up at this point in the season. It's getting late. There's not much, anybody else can really do. I don't think Mac Jones can even reach him at this point with very little to go off of for the rest of the season. Unless something like awful happens to Kyle at the end of the season, which God forbid that happens. But I mean, you mentioned it as well, and it's just the fact that it's the swagger he brings to the field. It's the confidence he not only carries himself with, but that it just breaches out to the rest of his offense. And you can see it that they're very confident with him in the huddle and him underneath center, or him back there in shotgun. And like you said, in terms of, the eye test, and you watch Mac Jones on film and then you look at Kyle Trask on film, and there's a vast difference, in my opinion, in terms of how both of these guys play and the style of play that they do. And the Heisman voters, they like the flash. They like the flashy.
Absolutely. You can blow the playbook open with Trask. You have to tend your playbook a little bit more towards Mac Jones and the weapons that you have. But with Kyle Trask, it's almost like 99% of the playbook is a go. He can make it happen. And that's what I look for. That's exciting.
Yeah, it seems like Mullen's kind of given him reins too, to be able to make checks at the line or see what's going on and be able to do that. So that just goes and tells you his football IQ as well. So, I mean, it looks really great right now in college. Hopefully, I'm a Trask fan, even though I'm a Florida State, fan ultimately. But I like Kyle Trask. It sucks that he plays for Florida, but I mean, I think he's going to be good, and I think he'll be a steal for somebody who can grab him, and maybe I think he would do better off maybe sitting a year, kind of like a Patrick Mahomes type deal. And
do you think he's a first rounder?
I think he can. I think he can sneak in there. I think he's probably third or fourth best quarterback that can go. I mean, you got to throw Trey Lance probably in there at 3 or 4 too. And Zach Wilson was originally, making his name known to be in that conversation as well. But after this last loss, I think that was very
4. Yeah, it was Trask 4, Wilson probably 5 right now. Or Mac Jones, or Mac Jones. Like right now, who are you taking, Mac Jones or Zach Wilson right now? If you're an NFL,
I mean, in my opinion, if I'm an NFL team, I just think there's so much promise in terms of what Zach Wilson can do if he learns more. Mac Jones already has all the information that he can get. I don't see him being able to make more strides on top of what he's already done. And I mean, not saying that Mac Jones is not going to be a good quarterback in the NFL, because I think if you put Mac Jones in the right system and the right, offensive mind for him, then
Right.
he can excel. I mean, look at what Tom
Right.
Brady has done throughout his career because he was in the right system with the right head coach and the right offensive coordinators being brought in and all that. So I think that's more of a Mac Jones deal, but I think ultimately NFL teams are kind of looking for that growth or being able to
Potential.
develop
Yeah.
right. And so that's kind of why I would take, Wilson over Mac Jones in that scenario.
Sure. No, I agree with that.
So yeah, we both got Kyle Trask winning, and we'll move on to looking at our draft prospects for this week, and these risers. Who are these guys that we're paying attention to who are starting to rise up draft boards? Doesn't matter if they're originally thought to not get drafted and are just moving into late rounds, or maybe started off as a mid-round draft pick and are now moving their way up into day one and day two draft picks. So Perry, I'll let you take the reins on this one.
Sure. I got offense to start. Najee Harris is just a man among boys, just like his teammate Devanta Smith. I know I'm staying on Alabama and Coastal Carolina for a lot of my highlights today, but both of those two teams have players that are worth highlighting right now. Both of them truly do. I think Najee Harris, senior out of California, so rep it, of course. Just an absolute tank. Obviously, he has already 1,000 yards on the season, a couple games left to go. He's got 20 touchdowns on the ground. Like, it is so crazy to see what he's been able to do. You look at last week against LSU. Obviously, they're not the LSU of last year, but still 21 carries, 145 yards, almost 7 yards a carry, 3 touchdowns. That's just playing with people. And the game before against Auburn, 96 and a touchdown. Game before that, 83 yards, 2 touchdowns, 119 yards before that, 96 yards, 3 touchdowns before that. Obviously, it's a hard guy to stop. He's not the fastest guy around, but he's very powerful. He's very elusive. I do like what I see when he runs. Obviously, you can see it to the right of me or the left of me right now, whatever side it's on, but you can see the kind of power, he has. He has really good vision. And I think that you can see he's an NFL running back already because you can see that he, one, has the size to do so. He's definitely fast enough to do so. You look at the Derrick Henrys out of Alabama. You look at the Mark Ingrams out of Alabama. They aren't fast players by any means. They are fast enough, elusive enough, powerful for sure, but just enough. And you can see what Nick Saban's been able to do, bringing in these prototypical running backs where it just seems like every year there's a clone of the one that left the year prior or 2 years prior or something along those lines. So I'm a big fan of him. Got to do a show, but you should look at Davion Nixon from Iowa. Absolutely. No, I love that. Good. And Iowa definitely deserves their respect this year too, even though you're not going to like my second upset winner, which is Wisconsin, but that's not my official. That's not my official pick. So we'll leak that now. But yeah, Najee Harris is just a guy that you want on your NFL team. I'm very impressed with him. And, I'll do my defense as well. I mean, Shaun Wade out of Ohio State. I'm repping the hat for my little cuzzo Lucas. He's over at Ohio State, so I got to rep it for the family. I'm an Arizona State man, if you guys know me personally. So I'm not the happiest when it comes to football right now, but got a lot of good pieces there. But yeah, Shaun Wade, I didn't see the year I was expecting from Shaun Wade in the beginning of the year. And it's cool because I think now you're finally starting to see him hit his strides, and is at the perfect time. If you're at least talking about his draft stock, obviously hasn't had the best year in regards to interceptions, finally getting this one today. It's only his second of the season, but I just really liked the way that he played last week. Like, I just really liked how all over the ball he was. I mean, he's just a consistent guy. Obviously you want to see more from him, but the last 2 weeks are the 2 weeks that he's had interceptions in. So the last 2 weeks, 2 interceptions after a really poor start to the year. He had a touchdown on that game against Indiana with that interception. So at least the last 2 weeks, which I believe, especially that Indiana game, was a really, really, really big game. Last week, not as much, but you have to realize how much Ohio State's been battling the COVID bug, how much they've had to endure this year. And to see Wade step up the way that he has the last 2 weeks, it's given me that faith that an NFL team is definitely going to take a chance on this guy. And he's going to be successful back there. It's good to see big time players coming up in big time games. And I definitely think Shaun Wade was killing every bit of draft stock that he had at the beginning of the year. And then obviously they haven't played as many games as you would like for him to get it together. But these last 2 games have been really good for him.
Yeah, I originally at the beginning of the football season had, Shaun Wade being the first corner taken off the board in the draft. And then, the beginning of the season, he just did not live up to the expectation that was placed upon him. And, I, myself and Sam both had dropped him down, maybe late first round or even possibly even sliding out into the early second round. And, but like you were saying, these past 2 games, he's kind of, resurrected himself a little bit. He's probably heard a little bit of the chatter, I would assume, and try to up his game a little bit more.
And you realize you don't have as many games. You realize you can't go out there and put that film together for NFL teams the way that other guys are right now. And it's not like the worst disadvantage because other guys are opting out and other teams are getting canceled too. So it's not like just their team, but still, especially from a defensive standpoint, where, like you said, do cornerbacks get all the love and do they get all the highlight reels and all of that stuff? Usually not that much. So you need to make the most of every snap that you have. And Ohio State's not going to have as many snaps as other teams this year. So a guy like him, that's going to really hurt his draft stock when the last 2 games really brought that back up for him. So it's good to see.
Yeah, it's great. And I was about to say that, after having him slip there and then after these last 2 games, I think he's probably moved himself back into that middle range area in terms of the first round. And you were talking about how I was saying earlier that a lot of these defensive guys don't have, the highlight tapes or the highlight reels or anything like that. Shaun Wade is one of those guys who does. And that's just because of his playmaking ability. You've seen it all last year, which are all the highlights you're seeing now. Not as much this year, but I mean, again, shortened season, so not going to have as much to put out there. But based off of his previous years, production, I don't see it being an issue for him, still being taken in the first round.
Yeah, I agree. I think the last 2 games solidified that for him for sure.
Yeah, and I guess that just leaves me in my offensive and defensive players that I'm looking forward to. And one that a lot of people might know about is a wide receiver out of North Texas, Jalen Darden. He has been putting on a show. He is really small. I think he's like 5'7", maybe like 180 or something like that. So he's a real small dude. But he's, we talked about on past shows about Kadarius Toney for Florida and how he's like a human joystick and he's probably one of the most elusive players in college football. I suggest you watch Jalen Darden's tape. He is an absolute freak of nature with the ball in his hands. He does amazing things that you don't really see in the speed. Look at that. He's just gone.
Absurd.
Albeit it's not against necessarily the greatest competition there being in North Texas, but on the year so far, and this is on a shortened season. So think about this: 66 catches, 1,017 receiving yards, 15 touchdowns, and averaging 15.4 yards a catch. It's pretty crazy. Right. It's pretty crazy. And then, I mean, you look at game in, game out, and I mean, you started off against Charlotte, had 13 catches for 244 yards. Against Middle Tennessee State, 10 catches, 204 yards, 1 touchdown. Oh, in that Charlotte game, he had 3 touchdowns. Against Rice, 4 catches, 50 yards, and touchdown. So bad, not necessarily a big game against Rice, but still respectable with the touchdown. Then they play UTSA, has 8 catches, 143 yards, and a touchdown. And then plays Louisiana Tech, has 8 catches, 135 yards, and 3 touchdowns. So this dude is absolutely lighting defenses up. And you know what? I don't believe North Texas necessarily has, a great quarterback that's probably throwing to him. But, I mean, just the things and the speed and the shiftiness that he has and the elusiveness to get free from defenders is absolutely amazing.
Yeah, he's probably making a case for that quarterback to get an undrafted spot on a camp this year. Like those statistics are going to show for him too. And that's funny. Like we mentioned other players making Heisman players, obviously this isn't a Heisman guy, but this is a wide receiver that's making that quarterback, I'm sure, have a much higher chance of succeeding in this level, but also the next level. And with this wide receiver, I think that's just probably a classic case of under recruitment or something happened in high school or something to where some of the other programs were turned off. Maybe he's a community college transfer, but one of those guys that somehow just slipped through the cracks, an immense talent that isn't shown on the big screen, isn't against the top talents right now. But like we mentioned before, a man among boys, and you have to play the competition that you have. Like you can't say that he's playing lesser competition. That's the competition he's playing. So you can only do the most of what's in front of you. So you can use that argument for sure, because it's more of a wild card if that having professional cornerbacks on him is going to take away that part of his game. But like you said, those numbers are absurd. Like, he's got to be on NFL teams' radars. Obviously, nothing crazy for picks, but I mean, he's got to be up there for a mid, second, third, fourth round pick kind of thing. Like, if a team's looking for a speedster, that's a guy, like, at least in the tape that you're showing right now and the stats that you read, like, he's making a case for himself.
Yeah, it's crazy because when I was researching him and everything, and there's a lot of things out there, just him going undrafted. And if he goes undrafted, could you imagine the type of steal that would be for a team? He's not obviously not going to be your number 1, 2, or 3 wide receiver right off the bat or anything like that. But he's definitely making his name known now, and people are starting to see what he can do. And the small stature might, teams might shy away from that. But at the end of the day, if you get drafted, or even if he does go undrafted, whatever team uses him, he's going to be a hell of a special teams player, in my opinion. Absolutely. I think he's like a perfect example of what you want in a special teams player, because he likes to play football. He doesn't care where. It's obvious. He just wants to play the game, and you put him anywhere on the field, he's going to try and make a play for you. So, I mean, he'll probably slot in as probably a number 5 guy somewhere, whether he gets drafted or not. And I mean, I like that for him. And putting up these type of numbers in college is pretty crazy.
Cool. Absolutely.
Yeah, and then going into my defensive player here, we are going to be heading over to Miami and the U, and that's going to be their defensive end, not Jalen Phillips, the one that has been, playing, out of his mind this season with Gregory Rousseau, opting out of the season and everything from the get-go. But here we have Quincy Roche, who is their transfer from Temple, I believe, and he had an absolute game this past weekend, and he's had a pretty decent year, even though Jalen Phillips has kind of run over, or been more of the guy in the headlines in terms of that Miami defense. But I mean, if you look at his stats this year, he's got 26 solo tackles, which isn't anything to write home about, but he's got 4 sacks, 2 forced fumbles, 0 interceptions. But his last game is really what stood out to me. He had 1.5 sacks, 4 solo tackles, so probably his best game on the season, and we were expecting that out of him from the beginning of the season and moving onwards, and it just hasn't been there. And so hopefully for his sake, that this game is kind of eye-opening for scouts out there to see, like, he still does have it. He just might need a little bit more grooming in terms of making it to the next level. And you know what? I don't have a problem, him going in the late or middle 2nd round, or maybe even early 3rd round. But I think he's going to be, probably a developmental project when it comes to the NFL, and in terms of putting his hands in the right place, putting himself in the right position, and, getting to know more of the defensive schematics when it comes to a defensive scheme. So it's going to be tough for him in the NFL, I think, just because it's, a learning process no matter what position you play, but especially on the defensive line and defensive schemes and where you're supposed to go, what hole you're supposed to hit and everything like that. But Quincy Roche is a freak of nature. Honestly, he's got long, talented arms. He just knows how to use them decently well right now at this level, and he gets after the quarterback, and that's what he was brought there to do, was rush the quarterback, and that's going to be a nice edge piece for somebody if they can snag him in the NFL draft.
Yeah, absolutely.
All right, and that'll do it for all of our standouts and our draft prospects to watch. And this is one of my favorite aspects, is to see everybody's upset picks of the week. And, if you guys got any upset picks, throw them in the chat, and we'll share them with everybody out there as well. But, Perry, I'll let you start with your upset pick. I know you were bouncing between 2.
Yeah, so I mean, my non-official one that would piss Garrett off, one of our guys, it's Wisconsin edging out Iowa this week. It's not against Iowa, but just the fact that Wisconsin, I think, is such a raw team and has had such bad luck this year. But quarterback is absurd, like a super talent at quarterback for Wisconsin. But the one I'm going to focus on is North Carolina against Miami. I know you just were mentioning someone that was on the U. I see them dropping this game. I mean, they've played a lot of close games this year, Miami. They've edged out a lot of really exciting games, put up a lot of points. That's what Miami's known for here. But, I mean, they've really given up a lot of points besides last week to Duke, which they shut them out. Duke's nothing special. Anytime they've played good talented teams, like they've put up points against them. It's been a close game. And I think that North Carolina, who has been the same, they put up crazy points. Every game that they play is super close. So I think North Carolina takes this one. I'm a big Sam Howell fan. I really think that he's the most underappreciated quarterback in college football right now. And I mean, we didn't even mention him for, the draft process. That guy is going to be in the NFL. Like, he's right there. Unfortunately, he's going to be drafted like a Jake Fromm or something like that. Like
I think he goes next year. I think he still has one more year.
Oh, okay. Well, I mean, regardless, wherever he goes, like
right.
I don't see him getting the national recognition that some other guys do, but I definitely think that whoever is lucky enough to get him, on an NFL roster eventually is going to have a really, really good player. Like, this guy is just a superstar. When I watch him, it's just super exciting. And North Carolina is not a football school. They do not have the weapons that even Kyle Trask at Florida has. Like, he doesn't have a Kyle Pitts. Like, he isn't Mac Jones blessed with everything there. Like, Sam Howell is really grinding these games out himself. And I really, really am impressed with North Carolina. I mean, they average over 40 points a game. They got a lethal offense. It's just the question every week is, like, can they hold the other team they're playing to less points? But that's college football a lot of the time. It's the lethal offenses over powerful defenses. That's usually a trend. But I'm going with North Carolina on this one. I think Miami's gotten a little too lucky on too many games, and I think this is one that they slip.
I 100% agree with you. I'm really looking forward to watching this game. It's going to be, look at this quarterback matchup, guys. De'Aaron King versus Sam Howell. That is going to be fun to watch. A lot of points on the board.
Bet the over. Well, whatever it is, just bet the over. Yeah,
yeah, right. I think it's at 67.5.
Oh God!
Vegas is probably right on the money there. But
God, I'm still going over.
Yeah, it's gonna be fun to watch. Looking forward to it. But yeah, Sam Howell is legit. He does have Serrat, who is an absolute animal of a wide receiver too. Like I was saying before, this wide receiver class is just extremely deep. It's incredible to see these past 2 years. The wide receivers that have come out of college and into the NFL. But I like that upset pick. I would have originally picked that too. I think North Carolina has, not necessarily done what they needed to do this year to be the team that everybody was expecting them to be at the beginning of the season. Their defense has kind of let them down, so you can't really put that on their offense. But Miami, like you were saying, has had all these close calls throughout the year against teams that probably shouldn't even be hanging in there with Miami. So this is probably the time for them to get upset. I think, Mac Brown's going to have the boys up and ready to go there in Coral Gables. So that's a good pick. But for me, I'm going to have to roll with Troy over Coastal Carolina.
I looked at that game.
Yeah, so I know Troy is not necessarily, a world beater of a team. They're a decent team, though. I mean, they're 5-5. They play in a pretty good conference. And, what I'm seeing in this, and the main reason I picked this is, all the emotion and
they've just put so much into that BYU game.
Right. It's just going to be an emotional letdown here, in my opinion. I mean, they most likely should win this game. It might be closer than people think, but if I had to choose one, I think this is a huge spot for Troy to, make a name for themselves in terms of beating a ranked team who is undefeated right now, and they just beat BYU. So your resume looks even better too there for Troy. I don't know a whole lot of players for either of those teams. I know Gunnar Watson for Troy is a pretty decent quarterback, but he's not a world beater. And
I'm pretty sure the defensive line coach at Troy is the defensive line coach that was on Last Chance U.
Okay.
The first couple seasons, the really fun-loving guy. He played D line at Troy. I'm pretty sure he's the D line coach there right now, so that's fun.
Oh, yeah,
that's
fact. Awesome. I'm sure they'll be fired up. I mean, if I'm heading into a game and I'm Troy and I'm heading into this game versus Coastal Carolina, who just beat BYU and they're now undefeated, ranked number 13 in the nation. I would just, come with, a fire on my ass. Like, I'm ready to beat this team and prove everybody that, hey, they're not as good as, everybody is saying that they are. And it was, a fluke, if you will, or anything like that. So, yeah.
That will help the recruiting so much, too, with Troy. Like, after Coastal Carolina getting this, just like we mentioned for them, with helping their recruiting with beating a team like BYU. If Troy does that on that kind of stage, big time.
Yeah, it's huge. I like it a lot. I still think Coastal probably wins. I know that's going against the rules of, picking an upset or or whatever. But I mean, the spread's at 13.5. Maybe wait till it goes up a point. buy that plus 14 for Coastal. Head over to my bookie, maybe buy an extra half a point if it doesn't rise. Use that code USN100, get double your first deposit, guys. Great stuff.
Absolutely.
But yeah, with that being said, that's going to do it for another episode of Saturday Standouts. I just want to thank Perry for, coming on here with me and joining me in Sam's absence. And I wish Sam nothing but the best in taking his college exams and his finals right now. So anything you want to say to the people before we go ahead and log off?
Good luck, Sam. College is important. Thank you for having me on, Caleb. Obviously, I had a ton of fun. I love the Saturday Standouts show. I'm glad I'm just able to be here and be a part of it. And one of my favorites on the Unwrapped Sports Network, as well as Caleb being one of my favorites on there too. So it's just been an absolute pleasure. Like he said, check out our shop. Like, absolutely, please. Got this fanny. I got my mask in the other room. I got hoodies on the way. I got all types of stuff going on. I got a computer on the back, or a sticker on the back of the computer. So I want all of you guys to please go check that out for us. Got some awesome designs, more coming, doing some work on there tonight as well. You'll definitely see some Saturday Standouts gear at some point too. So if you enjoyed today's show, you want to support Caleb, you want to support Sam, definitely grab some of that gear once we finally get those designs finalized. But if you can see it all on the bottom ticker right down there, go to teespring.com/stores/unwrapped. It's a great shop that we've put together there. A little something for everybody. Mainly just support us. And we even made a promo code for you right now. It's promo code support. Just put in support when you're checking out. 15% from our heart to yours. We appreciate it a ton. And we hope you appreciate that little discount and go and take your money and put it in our pockets and get a little bit of Unwrapped Sports gear and look fashionable with us, stay safe with us, stay stylish with us. Check out the Teespring shop. It's real important. And check me out at Perry Aston. It's my first and last name. I'm on Twitter, Instagram. Everything is just my first and last name. So check me out.
Yep, right there, right below his face, guys. And that's going to do it. Thank you guys for joining.